Welcome to GameSpot Live. I'm Greg Kasavin, here to take you on a guided tour through Metroid Prime for the GameCube, which is easily still one of the greatest games available for the system. We awarded it our Video Game of the Year award in 2002, and really there wasn't much competition for a game of such high quality and standards as Metroid Prime. Actually, though, Metroid Prime was a bit of a surprise in terms of how good it finally turned out to be. The series started way back in the late 80s for the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it was always kind of this open-ended action-adventure, side-scrolling shooter-type series that was really, all about like dodging enemies by jumping over them, and a lot of jumping from platform to platform and collecting items, things like that. So when it was announced that Metroid Prime was going to be a first-person perspective game, everyone jumped to the conclusion that it would just be kind of a first-person shooter similar to a game like Doom, only, kind of slapped with a Metroid coat of paint and, would lose sight of what the Metroid series was all about, which was kind of exploration and finding things and things like that, not just going from one level to the next. Well, it turns out the developer Retro Studios, which never worked on a project prior to Metroid Prime, did a fantastic job at bringing the feel of the old Metroid games to Metroid Prime. It's still all about exploration. It's still all about finding new areas, making use of new special abilities and new powers, finding bigger and better weapons, and fighting tough bosses along the way, things like that. Metroid Prime also just has a very, very cohesive look to it. There's no loading time whatsoever, so you're traveling seamlessly from one environment to the next, and really just becoming immersed in this alien world where the game takes place. In terms of plot, Metroid Prime basically retells the story of the original Metroid game, again just putting Samus on the heels of these pirates who are up to their bad business. And here at the very beginning of Metroid Prime, Samus arrives at this derelict ship where apparently these pirates are hanging out. So here she is going to land in her kind of private spacecraft and try to do these aliens in. But of course something's going to happen preventing her from getting away with things quite that easily. Not only does Metroid Prime follow in the same footsteps in terms of gameplay as the previous Metroid games, but it also looks quite a bit like them too, just in certain thematic ways. Samus herself is unmistakable, and fans of Super Metroid for the Super Nintendo will of course recognize her ship right there. And really just a lot of the same mechanics translate. Samus can roll up into a ball just like in all the previous Metroid games. She could drop bombs, these kind of energy bombs that could blow up enemies, or even be used to launch her in this morph ball form up to higher ground, because she can't jump while in this mode. At any point you could just switch back, and really when you're in the morph ball, that's the only time when the game is playing at from a third-person perspective. While in a first-person view, as is indicated on screen here, Samus can lock on to objects, and then her movement becomes relative. You just hold down the left trigger, and then you draw a bead on these things, and whether they're stationary targets or enemies, and then you could have at it pretty easily. And here we're introduced to a new device in Samus's arsenal, which is the scan visor. She puts her weapon down, and here she could scan objects in her environment and find out what's going on. So she scans this force field and realizes that it blocks the entrance, and the goal is to find the switch. She could scan this object here, Now the switches are online, and now she can shoot them out. So that's a very early example of what the puzzle solving is like in Metroid Prime. It does involve scanning a lot of objects. Samus can also scan all her enemies, and it's a very useful ability, such as when you're up against a tough boss with no obvious weaknesses, and you just need to know what it's going to take for you to be able to shoot it. So already there's a lot of bad business going on here. There's some dead space pirates, and Samus can go around and scan them. Here we see, you know, she's taking these accounts of these various alien creatures. And by scanning objects, that's really how the story of Metroid Prime unfolds. It's kind of an interesting storytelling mechanism. There are no big, long, like, cutscenes or anything in this game. There are no scenes of Samus like standing around and chatting with a bunch of characters. It's just her scanning these objects, reading the space pirates' data logs and things like that, and figuring out what notorious affairs they happen to be up to. Here's the first instance where we have to roll up into a ball to get to where we need to go. We could step onto this map grid and download a map of the area. And there's a brief animation of Samus kind of downloading the data. And then we could check out the 3D map by pressing the Z button at any time. This map is pretty intimidating at first. It's kind of this wireframe 3D model of the entire area. It takes a little while to get used to, and on the other hand, it's actually very, very functional. Like, each area of the map has its own unique name and label, and you could kind of jump to any area using a combination of the analog sticks. It shows you clearly by color coding what areas you've explored and what areas you haven't explored, and really it's just going to be an essential tool throughout the game. Here we see some of the space pirates that have been kind of knocked down. They're already injured, so it's not much of a fair fight. Later on we'll be fighting a lot more of these guys, and they'll be much, much more powerful because they'll be at full strength. The space pirates actually come in a number of varieties. Some of them are even cloaked and will require some special tactics to be defeated. As in previous Metroid games, Samus can fire missiles as well as her regular beam weapon. She can also charge up a more powerful beam blast and you know, deal a lot more damage that way. As you noticed, it can also be used to clear rubble out of the way, things like that. So not only are Samus's various beam weapons you know, used for fighting, but they're also used to kind of destroy objects in the environment and let you get to where you need to go. Now we come to a little surprise, the first of many in Metroid Prime. This is just a taste of some of the dangers to come, but Samus is no stranger to danger, and she'll deal with this particular danger the same as with any other, using her blaster primarily, although she'll have to scan this rather awful-looking creature to find out how exactly to deal with it. I could try to shoot at it right now, but it doesn't look like that's actually doing anything, so again, a good strategy is to scan first, stay out of its way. We could find out what it's up to. This is the Parasite Queen. A weak spot has been detected in its mouth, and it seems to have these shields orbiting around it, so let's just try to steer clear of those shields. By locking onto an opponent and using the jump button, Samus can execute these quick dodging maneuvers to rather easily avoid enemy fire and land her own hits. This Parasite Queen here has almost had it.